All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201. That's client-side scripting at Durham College in the winter 2020 semester, and it's week 12, part 2 of our broadcast. We're going to be using Mongoose, which is a module, an NPM module that we're going to connect to MongoDB with. Okay, let's talk about this. So this is the PowerPoint that we've been using from yesterday, and you can see that we need to get a MongoDB URI that kind of looks like this. Right, and it gives us some examples in our PowerPoint about how to do that. So first we create a variable, const URI, and so on, and then we can connect to Mongoose. But before we get there, I want to make a change to our project structure, and it's going to enable us to do different things. So here we are back in Visual Studio Code, and what I want to do is right now we have our node modules out here. We have controllers. Right, as an example, we have public, we have routes, all over the place, right? And what I want to do before we move on is move everything into a client server type situation. And I'm just going to kind of go into this a little bit. So really what I want is two folders, right? Outside of node modules. I want a server folder and I want a public folder. Okay, that's what the two folders I want. So let's make the new folder first. So I'm just going to click down here first and go to here and just make new folder. Let's call it server. Okay, and this way it'll encapsulate some of the stuff we're doing. Okay, so I want to drag views into that folder. Right, so that's the first thing I want to do, and that should move. What it should do is if it's done successfully, it should ask you to move. Right, so move. So views are in that folder, right? And just a moment, I'm getting a question, and I want to make sure that I handle your questions as well. Summer courses are still going on. As far as I know, only the ones that are, sorry, just to answer that question, yeah, they're going to go on, but no new intake. I know that they're not going to start new courses in the summer. Only the ones that were already online. I think they're going to allow you to do. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm just going to switch back to what I was doing here. Okay, so yeah, so inside there we need our views, we need routes. So let's take that routes folder and put that in there. Okay. So again, it's inside server. So we got views, routes, and then controllers. Take that and put that in there as well. Okay, so now we have kind of a public folder and a server folder, and we have app.js hanging out there and a data.json that we don't care about, right? Data.json was an example of some files, a contact list that we had, and later on what we'll do is maybe we'll incorporate this, and I'll talk about how to import this inside of our MongoDB. But really, at the end of the day, this is the kind of stuff that we want to do. So now I'm going to work inside of our server folder only right now, and I just want to make another change. I want to make a new folder inside the server folder called models. Okay, so again, I got roots, models, views, and controllers, right? So those four folders, and then one more, a new folder. I'm going to call this folder config. Okay, so again, the way you would read this is server config, right? That's how you would do. So you'd have all these kind of folders. If by the way, if you see different icons here, it's because I'm using an icon pack. Don't worry about it. I'm obsessed with making things look nice in my Visual Studio Code environment. That's just me. And there's a lot of extensions that you can download for this. Okay, so, but of course this is never going to work now because, well, not yet. App.js has got to be inside of config. Let's go there. Let's move that in there. Okay. And my server.js, well, that's not going to work because look, it's looking for a to require something inside of ./app, right? But that can't be anymore, right? It can't be anymore because app is actually sitting inside of another folder, right? So we want to do something like this, ./server and then /app. So we're going to go look inside of the server and inside config, and then inside config we want to look at app, and that's what is going to be looking. And actually Visual Studio Code just helped me out. Does this make sense? All I'm doing is I'm just doing the same thing. I'm just buried my my app inside of a config folder. Okay, now the app for the most part, app.js is unchanged except for some of this stuff. So this stuff now needs to be a little bit rerouted as well. Again, you might say that, okay, why the complexity? Well, actually, it's simplification what we're trying to do. We're trying to encapsulate everything inside of a server folder, and then we're only exposing server.js. The rest is inside of our server folder, right? And public is, you know, kind of like those assets, content, scripts, and so on that we're keeping in the public folder. All right, so that's what we're doing there. So again, just separating concerns more than anything else. Think about this as the client side. This is the server side, right? And then what we need to do is change this app.js. And then the way to do this, again, is all about, sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm doing things properly here. I don't want to have a reference I'm looking at, my own. I just want to make sure that we're good. So in my app.js folder, everything remains the same except for our routes, right? Because our routes now are looking somewhere else. So again, what we want to do is we want to go to, so think about this. We're inside here. We're going to go one up one. So one up, right? We're going to run one up to routes because we're inside app.js. We go up one. We're in routes, and then under routes we're going to go to index. So to do this right, and to let Visual Studio Code help us, if I start doing this, right, you can see .. It gives me routes, and then slash, and then say index, and that's the way it would be done. So I don't have to do it manually. It actually does it all for me. So .. means go up one level, of course, and then go down into this index route. Okay. So that's the first change, that for router, for our index router. And then the next change would be for our paths for our views. So it can't be just views, because remember, we're inside here. So we're going to go up one and then down into views. So it's got to be inside here where it says dir name. It's .. views, right? This one. Okay, so / views, because that's the right path now for everything. Okay. Everything else so far remains equal. Okay, and we have to look at any other pathing that we have to make sure that it's not messed up. And of course, there are other paths, right? For example, where it says path join dir name with public, well, public is like 2 out, right? So it's up one, right? We're inside this thing, up another one, and now we're into public. So it'd be like, again, this is for relative path .. / public, and you can see that works out, right? And that's the new path for public. Does that make sense? So we need to do this because otherwise our project's not going to work anymore. All right. All right. Now the big tests. We're going to press Control backtick, right? And we're going to look at nodemon. First, let's make sure we save our server. By the way, if you don't save this, it won't pick up on the changes, right? But we should be able to run this now. So nodemon. And then if not, it'll tell us. It'll crash, right? So let's go into localhost 3000, and we can see that works just fine. Any questions around that? So all I've done is just rejig some of the stuff that we already had in place. Some of these work, some of these don't. By the way, and the reason why some of these do and some of these don't is because I just haven't gone and configured that stuff. But otherwise, you'll see some of the same things that we've already worked on. I haven't changed any of this stuff right now. This is just the front face of what Express is serving us. Okay. So this is a big change, and this is a great place to put this up on GitHub. So I'll say we've rejigged all this. So I go to here, and you can see these are all the packages I've added in and so on. I'm going to say that I'm going to click this plus, which adds everything to the staging area. These are all the changes to the staging area. And I'm going to say restructured application. That's all I've done. I'm not going to go into too much detail, so just so you know when this is done. And then click on this little check mark, and then go to push. And this will be pushed onto our site online. Okay? Are you all with me? Hopefully you are. Great. So if anyone has issues, again, please take a look at GitHub and you see what I've done. But the files, just to recap, the files that I changed, right? I changed server.js. I had to change this part right here just so that way it looks at the right spot, right? So /server config app. I had to change inside the server. I had to change my app.js, right? My app.js had different paths that had to be adjusted, right, for this new thing. I had to do that, and that's all I've done so far. Okay. The next step for me, and this is how I do it. I mean, every coding house will do it slightly different than this, but I like to create a DB folder, right? And we're going to make that DB folder, or actually a DB file, underneath the config folder. So inside of my config, I'm going to make a new file. We're going to call this db.js. And inside db.js, we're going to start configuring our URI information. Okay, so inside here, it's not going to be a big file, all right, at all. What we want to do here is we want to put in so remember we did module exports in a couple ways so far. We said module dot exports and then dot, and then we added stuff. We can do that, right? We can also say that we can actually pass out an object as well, which is kind of interesting. If we say module dot exports, well, that's not just equal to something, that's equal to an object. We can do this too, right? So this is another thing we can do with module exports. This again is node. And inside the object, just like any other object, we can have properties for that object. And one of the properties we want, or the only one we want right now, is URI. We can make it caps. Think about this as a constant, if you will, right? And then we want to talk about how to connect to it. So we're going to kind of say MongoDB, right? And then ://localhost, because that's where we are right now. And then / and then the name of our database, which is MyDB right now, right? That's what we need right there. Okay, so that is our URI. Okay, so URI is a uniform resource identifier. That's what it is, right? And our app.js now, this part, has to connect to our db.js, and we have to have that in there. And we haven't included Mongo or anything like Mongoose. Or anything like that, but we want to do this because what this does is it gives me more control over how things come in play. All right, so again, the first thing I try and do is I want to connect our database. So here's our database setup, and I put this underneath this stuff. So I want you to think about this as these are all modules that help us, for Express. So these are modules for Node and Express. That's what this is. Okay, these are our route, basically this route information, right? And then what we want is our database setup, which we're going to do here. So before we do our routing, we're going to say here's our database setup, and inside there what we want is our let Mongoose equal to require and then Mongoose, which we've loaded, right? See how I picked that up? Because Visual Studio Code is smart enough to understand that when we load Mongoose, it's part of our package.json. It picks it up as a possible module, and so it'll recommend it to us. Notice right now I just restarted, and NodeMon is doing a great job at restarting. No problem. Okay, so this didn't stop anything from happening. But the next one is critical. Let DB equal to require. Right, and again, what we're going to do is we're going to say ./DB. Now, okay, so what does this mean? Well, DB is an object, and if I hover over it, DB has one thing, URI. So the DB URI is what we want to connect to. So Mongoose is the package that we're connecting to, and we're making a reference or an object instance that we're holding here inside of Mongoose. That's what we're doing. So we have this kind of stuff. And then our DB is our access to our database. So I can literally do, if I want to on another line, I can say db.uri, oops, URI, and it comes up as a thing, right? And you can, if you hover over it, you can see that URI is a string. It'll tell you this inside of VS Code. That's why I love VS Code so much, because it really gives you some good code hinting for free. Okay. So the next part, after we set up our database connection, we want to point Mongoose to the DB URI somehow. Okay. And the way to do that is to say, hey Mongoose, I want you to connect, right? And I want you to connect to what? So notice our URI string. We want to connect to db.uri, okay? And then there's several options. And one of the things I guess is common is this idea of use new URL parser, and I want to do that, and that's true. Okay, so that's kind of an option that I like to use, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so that's connect. So that's what this does. So it connects, it attempts to connect to that URI. That's what this thing does. So our URI is MongoDB. Now it's going to fail right now, right? We know this, right? Because why would it fail if we tried it now? In fact, if I was to press Control or save and Control backtick, you can see that it's not working, right? It's not working because there is no MongoDB service running in the background. Let's run that to make sure it works. So we're going to say, go to command prompt and then run mongod. Okay? And there it is. There's mongod, our little service running in the background. Okay, and one of you had a question, I think, or a comment. Thank you for that. User, ha ha ha. That's so funny. I didn't mean to do that. That's what happens when you're flipping back and forth between one thing and another. Use, not user. Use new URL parser is what it should be. Okay, use, not user. Thank you. But that's not the nature of the problem. Notice now that we've connected. It says deprecation warning. Current server discovery and monitoring engine is deprecated and will be removed in a future version. It says to use the new server discover and monitoring engine, pass option use unified topology true to the Mongo client constructor. All right. So that means not only does it want this use new URL parser, but it also wants this. So use unified topology. Let's try this out. True. This is all new stuff, and again, it continues to update. And there we go. No URL, no warning, and that's where that came from. This use new URL parser and you use unified topology true. Those two things came from changes to Mongoose and how it connects to MongoDB. Okay, so that's one thing. Notice that there's no error anymore. Okay, that's what it does. So it connects to the database. If it couldn't connect to the database, and again, if I shut it down, so let me show you this. If I press this, shut this down, so it's shut down now. And if I restarted the server, you can see now. Well, actually, it would still try and work. Let's see, did I shut this down? Let's just Control C to quit this in NodeMon. Yeah, so a lot of times what this will do is it'll shut down. It won't work. All right, if the server is not running. So that's this. Okay. Okay, so that's what this does. It tries to connect to that URI, and then if everything goes well, it's working. Okay. Next part after this is we want to let MongoDB be a part of the connection. So we're going to say, so the first thing is, hey, we connect to it. The next part is, hey, let MongoDB. We're going to kind of create a reference for MongoDB is equal to this Mongoose connection, mongoose.connection. Okay. And then we're going to say, hey, MongoDB.on, and there's the first thing is, like we said, is on an error, right? Then what we want to do, we want to console.error.bind. We want to bind the error to the console so that it shows connection error. And I'll talk about this in just a sec. The reason why we have to bind it to the console is because the way it's connecting to the Mongo database. And then, so this on is an event, okay? So notice it says Node.js emitter.on, right? That's what this type is, okay? Just like we saw earlier this semester with jQuery, and think about on as add event listener, okay? So MongoDB add event listener equivalent error. When we hit an error, we want you to show that there's a connection error on the console, right? That's what we want. So if there's some kind of error, it's going to generate a connection. Now there's no error right now, but it's going to be. And then MongoDB, this is all, by the way, inside of your book, your PowerPoint. Once open, so once means it's like an event that only happens one time. On the first time that we open a connection, what we want is for there to be a callback function that runs. And this callback function is going to show us that we're connected to MongoDB. So literally a console log that says connected to MongoDB, right? Okay. So if we save this now and we go back to here, you can see that we're connected to MongoDB because this passed. So we had a connection. There was no error. When the connection was open, because the server was restarted, right? It produced this thing. Now, let's shut that down, like I said. So if I shut this down now, and if I press this a couple times, right? So it shuts down. Here we were connected to MongoDB, but if I restart the system, right? As an example, right? It's every time it tries to connect again, and there's nothing going on right now. It'll create an error. All right? It doesn't create an error right now because MongoDB is still running in the background. But if somehow we couldn't connect or something, it would spit out an error here for us. Okay. Let's redo it. So I'm going to go back up and go to MongoDB. And once we do that, once we've connected, it says, hey, we're connected. So notice, as soon as we did, we were connected to MongoDB. And before that, there was no connection. All right. It was just the connection string was right, everything was good, but we hadn't connected to MongoDB. Okay, we're just going to minimize that for a second. All right, so you should see that as well. So these are the lines. Let me just go back here and talk about this. So the first part is, actually the very first part is, hey, let's make our connection string. We're going to do this in our db.js. Okay, that's the first part. Once we've done this, module exports, and again, we've done module exports. I could have written this differently, by the way. Instead of module.exports and this, I could have literally written it as a URI string, a URI object, and the URI object would have been just this string. So I could have written it differently. There's many ways you can do the same thing in Node.js and in JavaScript, and this is just one way. And then in my app.js, two things. First, I require Mongoose, and then I connect to that URI. I use that URI, DB. And so I can say db.uri, right? That's what I'm going to use to connect. And I have some constructor parameters that are going to make Mongoose happy, right? Because that's what they need. That's what Mongoose needs. Because otherwise, if you don't put this in, if you just leave db.uri, there'll be a deprecation problem. A lot of this is because of security, by the way. And then let MongoDB is equal to this new connection. So we're actually making this new object. When I hover over MongoDB, you can see that MongoDB is just a connection object. And then we could have actually called this connection, if you really wanted to call it, or DB connection, right? And then our connection on error, any kind of error we get from the connection, then we can, we would have this error. No, there's no error that was thrown yet. And then one time we have this open. When we're open, then we want this this thing to happen. Okay, on once. There's other events that you can listen for as well, right? So and again, for those kind of events, you can look at Mongoose, and there is a long detail of different kinds of events in their documentation on Mongoose.js online. And for that, if you want to get that information, let's go there. So Mongoose.js, and if I want to look at the information it has here, here's Mongoose Connect, just like we did before. Notice it has that new URL parser and use unified topology true. So that's new, that stuff. And we're going to make our model now in a second. But that's really getting started. They have a quick start guide here. So if I click on quick start guide, it talks about how to get going. And that's the db.once, db once open, right? And there's other kinds of events if you wanted to get more documentation. So if I wanted to say, let's say I search for connection, right? So connecting to MongoDB, connection events, there we go. So connecting, there's one. Open, there's another one. Disconnecting, disconnected, close. So let's see if we can get the disconnected event, because we don't have that, right? So I want to see when it's disconnected. So we can do another one. So we can say on one time, every time we can disconnect, let's see if we can do this. So MongoDB, right, .once. We'll talk about the difference between once and on, right? And then disconnected, right? So again, you can see that that is an event. When it's disconnected, we want to do the same thing. We want a callback function, right? And in the callback function, we just want to print out a console log that says disconnected from MongoDB. Okay, disconnected. Okay, and we'll save that. We'll go back. You can see we're connected, but what happens if we disconnect? Can we get that? Can we stabilize that somehow? And notice that we didn't get a disconnected event, right? We've connected, but we've never disconnected, right? Oh, there it is, disconnected. Why? It tries to pull and to get it back. So now if I go back and I launch it again, we can see that we should get another connected to MongoDB again, right? Now notice, question for you guys, do you think we're going to get another one, connected and disconnected? And if you're thinking yes, well, then it may not be the case, right? Why? Because of this once thing, right? Once. If I change this to on, and I change this to on, right? So every time we connect, we could have this. And I'm going to relaunch. Now let's see the difference here. So here's connected to MongoDB, right? There it is. And now I'm going to disconnect. So disconnect. Okay, so we should get a disconnected from MongoDB in a second, right? Gotta wait for it. Because what happens is there's an interval when this thing tries to connect and disconnect, right? Okay, so far no. And what about when we connect again? So if I go back and connect. So the expectation is that you would see a connects to MongoDB again and again, right? When we're connected and disconnected. But actually, that's not the case. Okay. So let's go back. So put these once back. And chances are you're not going to see a connection or disconnection notice more than once anyway. So we should see connected to MongoDB. And now if I go back and disconnect, once we've disconnected after a moment, then you're going to see us disconnected from MongoDB again in a second. That's what we should do when we march in and out. There it is, right? And we'll just restart. Okay. So that's what this does. These little messages connecting and disconnecting from the database. Okay, so that's the first part of what we want to do. And that's all inside of our PowerPoint. Our PowerPoint basically talks about how to do this. It talks about how to make a module exports. It also talks about a session secret, which I'm not going to make. And it talks about how to make a constant DB. That's another way to do it. So there's a couple ways to do this. Mongoose.connect and then using config.db, right? Where we say config is equal require slash config and so on. We're just making it slightly different than this. That's all. Okay. All right. So there is it says to initialize your Mongoose configuration, go back to your server.js and change these settings. There is this thing called process.environment.node.env, right? So node environment is what this is, right? And the node environment detects what status you're in. Are you in dev mode, like development mode, or are you live? Okay? And if you're live, it changes the localhost 3000 to whatever the port is on Heroku, as an example. So because, you know, port 3000, if everyone used port 3000 on Heroku, then there would be only one user that could do that, right? So that wouldn't be any good. You'd have to change the local host from localhost to something else. Okay, so that's something that would have to happen later on. And notice that what we did was exactly this. You could configure Mongoose. Here, what is done is they've put it into a separate configuration, you know, as an example file that they've put inside Mongoose. And the same thing with Express, where you can configure Express differently and separately. We're not going to do that here. But this is generally how that you could restructure your code to make it look somewhat like this if you wanted to. Okay, going back to this then. So we've got this part, and this is a great place to put it up on GitHub because we established a connection with MongoDB. So here we're going to say add all this to the staging area, and we're say established connection with MongoDB. Okay, that's what we've done. Push. All right. And again, I'm pushing a couple times so that way you guys have everything that I have, and even people watching on YouTube, you can do what I'm doing. And I'm going fairly slow here because I don't want to go much faster than this. All right, so yeah, I mean, that's the first part of it. And what I want to do is I want to talk about this model idea. So before, what we were doing, I'm just going to stop. By the way, I know that performance-wise, I slow things down. So I'm just going to go back to video. I'm going to stop the video for now. I'm just going to keep on sharing my screen. No video. Okay. So performance-wise, what ends up happening is if I share my video and I'm doing this at the same time, then it gets a little slower. So that's why I'm not doing it. But what I want to do now is think about this models folder. So in the models folder, right, I don't have a file right in the models folder right now, and I need to put one in there, and that's going to help me establish our connection to our database a little bit differently. Okay, so I'm going to go into the models folder now. Okay, and I'm going to make a new file called contact. So let's go in there. So under models, I want to make a new file. I want to call this contact.js. Here's contact.js. And I'm going to require Mongoose again. So here's Mongoose equals to require Mongoose. All right. And what I want to do with this is I want to create a model class, because that's really what a model is, just a class. And it's going to look like this. We're going to say that our contact schema is equal to a mongoose.schema. So I want you to think about a schema. Well, by the way, this is a constructor, right? I want you to think about a schema as a structure, if you will, for our a specific collection. Okay, so here under models, the contact model in this folder is the model for the contacts collection. All right, this contacts collection. Okay, so here we're going to just establish, you know, our structure for the contacts collection. So again, we've been using first name, which is a string. Notice I have to put caps on the string. That's a Mongoose thing, not a JavaScript thing. And then last name, we've used last name, which is a string. And you know what? We can add other things in here, but I think contact number is one thing we've been using. So contact number, here's our contact number, which is also a string for now. Okay, that's what it is. So those are the three fields, if you will, or properties that we have inside of our contacts collection. Those three things. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to add another object at the end of this. And someone might be asking a question. One sec while I go back to this. Are we still good? Looks like you are. Okay, so again, so first name, last name, contact number, and then another object that's in here after the comma. So again, schema is basically of a different type. You can make whatever type you want. But this area here talks about the collection name. So we can say my collection, right, is called what? Contacts. That's our collection. Remember? db.contacts.insert. db.contacts.remove. You know, whatever you want to add, right? So that's kind of what we have in here. Does that make sense? So that is our model, right? And that's all that's going to be in here. Except that we also have to export it. So module.exports, and what we're going to do is we're going to say mongoose.model, and then we want to call this the contact model, right? And it is, we're going to use the contact schema for this. So notice that that just lit up. So model, if I hover over that, basically says I need a string name, the name for the model, right? It tells you right here. And then the collection. If we want to, we can specify a collection as an optional parameter, right? That's an option here. So we actually did it over here, right? But you can specify it in the model as well. Okay. And then the next part is the the schema that we want. So schema is optional, right? Remember the question mark is optional. It says, hey, I need a name for this for the model, but I also need a schema, and that schema is optional. But we're passing in a schema, the one we just made, which is this one right here. Okay. So when we export from this file from contact.js, it's actually going to include this stuff. We're going to have our a Mongoose model, and the Mongoose model is going to include all the stuff that included in the schema. Okay. So this is the one part that is super important for us to include when we do our routing. Okay. And if you go back, we can still see we're still connected, even though we can continue to connect to MongoDB. Okay, all good so far? Hopefully you are. And then we're going to go back into our roots for a second. Okay. So inside of our roots, right? So far we have our index root that basically takes us into the, shares our information and so on, right? And then what we want is another root altogether that's going to be used for accessing our other parts of our information. So far we've got one root as an example. And let's suppose I have a contacts page, right? A contacts page that I want to show. All right. So far we don't have this contacts page. All right. But let's suppose in our index.js we have a in our contact, I want to have an area that I want to show all of my contacts. I want to know almost like a contact list or something like that. Okay. Right now I have a contact, but I don't have anything for contacts. So I want to find like more than one contact kind of thing. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm thinking about making, right? Something like a contacts page, right? And in order for us to do that, we need a few things. Okay. So we need a new router, okay? And we also have to have a new route that's going to be set up to get us to that contact page. Okay, so I'm going to go back, before we go into more further, I'm going to go back to my config. I'm going to go back to my app.js, right? And there's a couple things I want to establish, right? One thing is I want to make this new contact list. So I'm just going to go back. Someone's talking or something up on Zoom. Just a second. Heads up. Okay, screen froze for me. Same. Okay, now we're good. Thank you. Yeah, that's what happens sometimes. I do apologize. I'm trying my best to make it as slow as possible so it doesn't freeze too much. But then I'm doing a lot, right? So that's why it's happening. So bear with me, guys. All right. So what I'm saying is, I'm just going to comment this in. All right. So it's going to look something like this. I want another contact router. So far I have an index router, and I want to establish a contact router that's going to look something like this: /roots/contact, right? That's what I want. That's going to be my contact router. Okay. And I'm not going to enable this yet. I'm just showing you what I'm going to do. Okay. And then down in here, we have one route, this / I want to be able to get to my contacts by doing this. App.use. Again, I'm just commenting it out so you can see what it looks like. /contact list. Okay. And my contact list is going to use my contact router. Okay. So this may be confusing to some of you because you're like, wait a minute. Tom, you said that when we use our index router takes us to the index, right? Yes, it does. And what is the index? / means the root of my website. That means, like, if I don't put anything in, and let's say my website was called www.example.com, and if I just went to www.example.com by itself with nothing, it would take me to, this route here would activate, would trigger. And this route triggering, anything that starts with a / is what this is saying. Okay, cool. Well then, if it's something that starts with a / or comes from a /, like /home, /contact, /whatever, right? But it starts with a /, right? Then I want you to use this router right here, this index router. And if you look at this routes index, which is in here, this is what the index router does. And there's a bunch of routes we've established for this. Okay, but now I'm saying something totally different. What I'm saying now is, I don't want to just go into / by itself. It's going to start with /contact list. Everything that's going to start with contact list. It's almost like another area on my website. That's what it is. That starts with contact list. Almost like a sub area, right? Or group, if you will. All right? A group of links that's going to start with contact list / something else. Okay? So let's make that. So under routes, let's make a new file that we're going to call contact.js. Okay, so that's the first thing. So here's our contact.js route. And we're going to get this slowly as we go through, and hopefully you'll understand at the end. That's why this is such a big undertaking, because to be done in 2 hours is like crazy hard. All right, but we're going to try. The first part is let express in our contact route, just like we did before, equal to require express. Okay, so we're going to do the first thing. So we're going to require the modules we need specifically for this. We're also going to establish a new router. All right, for this file, express.router. Okay, just like we've done before. So that's a new router object that we've created. And then what I want is, here for the first time, I'm using a model. So I'm going to say that, hey, actually, we need a controller now, right? We need some kind of controller. And we want this contact controller to be the thing, a contact controller, right? Because we don't want to mix our logic with our routing. So for now, let's keep this in mind. This contact controller is missing. And this is kind of a to-do. So we're going to say to-do add contact controller. Okay, so I'm leaving that as a to-do. Notice it glows nicely yellow because of my code coloring. All right, and let's just start scaffolding the roots for this thing. Okay, So the first thing I want is the contact list page to come up. It's going to be our read operation. That's going to be our first operation, our read operation. Okay. So I'm going to say we're going to use the get operation to get the contact list, right, page. And this is what this is, a read operation. Okay. Remember, we're doing CRUD today as much as possible. Okay. Some of it we can do, some of it we won't be able to do. And it's going to be router.get. Okay. And then inside router.get, you want to look at the slash again. And you're going to say, wait, you used the slash already, Tom. You're right. We did use the slash already. But the slash that we used before, right? Remember what we did? The slash we used before was for the index route. Remember? This one. This is when we use the slash. Okay, for the index route. We're not using the slash for the index route. This is the slash for the contact list. That means that whenever I put contact list, that's what this slash means. Slash in this context, because we're inside of the contact list route, it means contact list with nothing else after it. Just contact list by itself. Contact dash list. That's what this means. Okay, and just like before, we're going to get our request, response, and next object, and we're just going to make it for now an empty object, okay, just so that we have something in here. Okay, so that is our contact list page. Okay, what I want here is to access my contact controller, but I don't have that, so let's make it now. This is part of our to-do. So again, under controllers, I have my index controller, and what I want to do now is establish my contact controller, right? So we're going to make a new file called contact.js inside of controllers. New file, contact.js. So we have index.js, this is our index route, this is our index controller. We have contact.js, that's our contact list route, and our contact controller. And we also have a contact model, which we're going to tap into in a sec. So our contact controller, just like before, we're going to say let express equal to require express. And instead of we may not need the router, but we're going to include it anyway. So let router equal to express dot router. Okay, I need that part for now, and it should be a capital R. And now we want to create a reference to the DB schema that we just made, right? And to do that, we're going to say let contact model, right, equal to require, and again, it's where are we? We're inside of the controllers folder. We're going to go up one and then down into models. So up one, down into models, and then inside there we're going to go to contact. So that's the contact model. So we're requiring it here. Why? Why not require this in the app.js? Because the app.js doesn't need to know about the contact model. Only the contact route does. And the contact route is actually using controllers, the contact controller, as the main thing to get the information for the model. All right? So we're kind of encapsulating an information hiding here a little bit, okay? Because it makes sense. All right, so we want to make the first one, right? So we're going to say, okay, module.exports. Remember we did this? Dot. And now we're going to establish the function, display contact list. Okay, so that's what it's going to be called. And that's going to be equal, this is something different that we haven't done before. It's going to be equal to request, response, and next, right? It's a little different than we did last time, with an arrow function. Okay, here's our arrow function. Okay, so that's what it's going to be used, display contact list for now. And what I want to do, I'm just going to set the connection up right now so we don't have to go back. I'm just going to go back to my contact.js in the routes. Okay, this is what it would normally be like, but we're using the controller for this. Let's connect our controller, right? Because what I want to do is I want to make sure that you guys get step by step how this would be handled. Okay, so here where we have our to do, we want to connect the contacts controller, right? That's what we want to do. So it looks like this. It says let contact controller, okay, contact controller equal to require, again, it's going to be up one into controllers and then into contact. Okay, so that is going to give us our contact controller. I only have one thing in here. If I hover over this, you can see that contact controller is something that we've used, but instead of it doing normally doing this way and putting stuff inside here, because inside of our contact controller we did this here, right? This is new. Module exports display contact list is equal to this, right? Is an anonymous function that has request, response, and next parameters. Then in my contact router, we don't have to put this here. We just have to make a reference to our contact controller display contact, right? So it's like this, contact controller dot, and you can see that it comes up display contact list, and we just have to call that, actually just that by itself. So why not the brackets? Because think of what this is. This is an event, actually. So get is actually an event listener, if you think about it. It says, okay, we're listening for the get event. When we get this event, the slash event, which is the main contact list page, right? Then I want to call a named function called contact display contact list, which is inside the contact controller folder. That's all we're doing. So this is another way to do it here, like this, instead of doing it this way, which is perfectly valid as well. Okay, so instead of passing the response object in like this, we could have done these like this. I just wanted to take it slow. Okay, so that's just how this is. So this is the only route that we have. And now we're going to go back into our contact controller and fix this up, because that's the first part. All right, so let's go back to our contact controller. And just bear with me while I do this. So I want to make sure I get everything correct for you so you don't mess up. I don't mess up, because messing up is easy, by the way. All right, so cool. So I've got this, and now I'm going to use my contact model for the first time. Contact model, remember, is a Mongoose thing, right? So I'm going to say, hey, contact model dot. I'm going to look at all the things I can do. These might be familiar to you now, right? Because we did a little bit of MongoDB. Don't they look like MongoDB commands? Find, find one, create, and so on. Well, I want to find, which means find all. That's what it means. And I want to pass in a new object, an object that can take an error, and an object that is the contact list object. That's what it's going to be called. Okay, it's my own name. I can use whatever. I can put whatever parameter name I want in there. It's just a parameter. Okay, and it's going to be an anonymous function again, an arrow function. By the way, one thing that Node has always been criticized for is this idea of nested functions within functions within functions. And yeah, it can look very complex. Okay, so now the first thing we're going to check is, do we have an error? So if the error is true, we have an error. If we have an error, then what do we want to do? We want to return. We don't want to do anything. We want to return. We want to do console.error, and we want to print out the error that we just got. So if we have an error somehow we can't display the contact list, we want to spout out an error to the console. However, if we don't have an error, and by the way, this else is kind of redundant, but I put it in anyway, just so that way it's easier for us to read. Else, if we don't have an error, right, then what I want to do is I want to, for now, I want to console log, just for now, my contact list. Whatever I get in the contact list, I want a console log. Okay? This is for now. So this is our little controller. All I'm doing is I want to go to contact-list, right? And let's see if I'm still up. We're still looking pretty good here from a module perspective, and let's just go through it again and see what happens. So I'm going to go up to my page. So again, back to my page here. So this is my page right here. And what I want to do is, if I go to slash, so this still works, it just takes me to my site. But if I put in here a custom link, contact dash list, and then press enter, well then I have a problem, right? Contact list, here's my contact list. And let's see what the error is that I'm getting. I shouldn't have a problem, I should see some stuff coming up, right? But I don't. Okay, notice that I've got a connection. That's what's happening. I'm still connected to this. This is important that we're still staying connected to our database. That's what this is. Okay. And the other thing is, what error are we getting here in the console? So we're not getting a console. We're just saying contact list is a 404. Right? That's what's happening. Contact list is something that we just can't find. Okay. And what about, I'm just going to put a couple things out there for you. Okay. So this is contact list. Why? Because in our app.js, here's our app.js. So notice it hasn't been saved. In our app.js, all this is still commented out. Let's comment it in. So we have app.use contact list. And then we're going to go, that's the first thing. And then up here, we're going to put the contact router in. So this is where we uncomment stuff. And if I save stuff now, if I save it, and you can see that I'm launched again, it says that, well, we have a bit of a problem, another problem. It says we're getting a new error and whatever, and it tells me where under router index.js 458. Okay, and we're going to come back to this in a sec, but just one step at a time. All right, so this is actually a good error to have because it's telling us that we're up and running. We don't have a 404. This is what we want to have, something like this. Okay, so again, back up to our page. If I go to my main page here, right, notice that it's going to spin forever. Why? Because down in here we're crashed, and the way to uncrash us is to restart, right? And it says site can't be reached. Okay, so what is the problem now, right? So we did everything correct up here. It's all saved, but it says, okay, we're throwing a new error. And this is kind of like the stack. If you think about this, this is all the stuff that's happening here. So I'm saying, okay, so I'm on server.js. This is the first part of the stack. And then it goes to config that app.js on line 41. Right, let's follow this through. Right, then we're in express.js. So we're actually using an express function. And then it says, hey, there's node modules, my application.js, my express router, right? And then router.use requires a middleware function but got an object. All right, so router.use is something that's a problem, and it tells us where, right? It's on right here, right, where we called it under app.js 41. So where is 41? Right here, app.use, right? Contact list, contact dash list, right? And then contact router. Contact router is here. / roots / contact. So it's in here somewhere, because remember, this is just a substitute for actually putting all the code in one big file, right? So let's go back to my contact router. So here's my contact router, and it's going to go in here. And then what's wrong with this? Well, it's not there's no module exports, right? So again, we're missing some stuff, and this is okay. This is what we know, because we can trace our problems, and it's very important that we're able to do this, because if we can't, then when you're on your own trying to do this, you might have issues. You might gonna say, Tom, I don't know how to fix this. And I'm gonna say, did you add a module exports, just like I didn't just now, right? So what we want to do here is at the very end is go module.exports, right? That's equal to the router that we just created. And notice on the bottom, when we do this, if I restart my changes, we're good. We're green now. See? We're green. And you can see this as a pattern, because even our index.js router has that module exports router, right? Okay, let's see if that works now. So if I go back to this, we're not crashed anymore, so we should be able to get this. And if I type in contact lists, contact dash list, then I'm hoping to get something on the console, right? Remember, it's not going to show up here right now. There's nothing to show because we're not rendering a page. What we want is inside here, we want to render this on the console, right? And sure enough, here it is, right? That's the stuff that's still inside of my database from yesterday. This page here is going to spin forever. Why? Because there's no rendering happening. Are you with me? Because this is what we want to get to, guys. This is us reading from the database, but not actually populating anything is on the page yet. Okay. Cool. Okay, I'll be back in 1 second, guys. I need a 2-minute break. I just gotta go to the washroom. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. So let's establish what we did just now before we continue. Right? I'm back. So how do we get this? What is this? What does this mean? Why is it that we got this an array of objects? What do we get this from? And then you can see that we got data here. And plus we got this other thing here that we never asked for, and so on. Right? So these are all the things that we've asked for. So again, let's pull up a little. I'm just going to pull up another little kind of window here in my console. I'm going to type in Mongo, not the server. This is just the client, Mongo. Now that I'm here, I can look at, I'm just going to clear the screen. I want to look at the database a little bit. So I'm going to say, okay, show DBS. So show databases is what this is, right? I want to use MyDB. Okay, so now I switch to MyDB. This is all a refresher from yesterday, right? It's almost like a CD command they use, right? Okay, cool. Now what I want is db dot, actually we can do the next one, which is show collections. Let's say if you didn't know what the collections are, we have the contacts collection. Cool. So db.contacts.find, right? And then we want to pipe that into pretty to make it look nice. And we get this, the exact same thing we got before, okay, that we saw. And we can see that one of my contact has an ID of 1. And that's okay. It doesn't have to have anything. This ID will be ignored anyway. Let's make one more contact. So I'll say, just like we did before, I'm going to say db And by the way, if I kind of scroll up, you can see all the commands I have this session. So db.insert, right? And we want to insert inside of a collection, contacts.insert. And we want to insert what? Well, we want to insert an object with a first name, just like we've done before. And the first name is going to be Tony. We'll make Tony Stark again. And then the last name, which is Stark. And then we also want to talk about the contact number, because of the three things we have, which is 416-555-5556. That's the one that's not being used. Curly brace and bracket, press enter, right? Okay, so now that we've done this, what do we see here? Well, we never read it again. We only read it once. That's why we're only seeing this. However, if I go back up to my window here, and if I press refresh, so stop it and then refresh that, I get this. And if I go back to contact-list and press enter, now you can see that I'm getting all three contacts here. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, there's a bit of lag I can see between what I'm seeing and what you're seeing. Okay, so there's all three contacts. So how is it that I'm listing it here, but inside of my controller, which is inside of my contacts controller, so controller's contact, I'm just showing a contact list. A contact list is what I'm outputting, right? But it's showing me that whole thing. Why is that? Well, because just like it says here, it's a document array. You can see that when I'm hovering over, it says document array, right? This is a document array. This is an error, which is of type any. So document array if I hover over, right? That's what's happening here. I'm getting a document array. Now, a document array is not what I want long term. A document array is what I want just now, right? Instead, what I want, instead of a document array, is I want some way of rendering this thing to the page, right? But what's missing is we don't have a view for this contact list, right? We have other things, right? But we don't have a view for my contact list. So if I go back to my controller here like I have 1 second and look at my contact, right? What it should look like is something that looks like this. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to comment it out. So I'm going to put it in some comments for you, but this is what it should look like, okay? We don't have this yet, but we're going to have it. We're going to res.render, right? Res render inside of something that looks like contacts, a index page, right? So a special index page just for contacts, another index altogether, all right? A contacts index, another template, basically is what we're asking, okay? And inside that template, inside this template here, what I want is to pass in a title. So I'm going to say I want to have a title object. This is my object I'm passing into the template, right? Contact list, right? And I also want the contact list to be passed in. Contact list. I want to pass in the contact list. Okay? Remember, these are properties. And that's what I need right now, just this. But I don't have this view. I don't have this template at all. All I have right now is my index router. That's all, my index view, right? So what I need instead is I need to make a new view, right? That's inside of my another folder. So instead of just having an index.ejs file, right, that has a basic view, okay, that right now includes a header and a footer and so on, I need another thing altogether, right? Now I don't have to. I can certainly use my contact, my you know, the same thing that I've been using so far. I can do that, no problem, okay? But I wanted to introduce the idea of having more than one template, all right, that you can use. It can use the exact same folder structure, but the reason why I'm doing this is because for the next assignment, Lab 5, you're going to have something, you're going to establish something else that you're going to make, okay? So I'm going to go into my views folder to prepare, right? And this will probably end us off with what we can do today. Notice I have partials and content. I'm going to make a new section, a new view group or view folder called contact. So new folder, just like when we have here, contacts. So new folder, and we're going to call this contacts. Okay. Inside of our contacts folder, we're going to make a new file. And the first file we're going to put in, just like we show here, is index.ejs. Okay, my index.ejs is going to include, right, include ... slash, because we have to go up one, right, into partials, right, down into partials. We're going to go into our header.ejs, right, and that's what we want to include. And it's going to be very similar to our index.ejs. Our index.ejs does this, / partials, because it's on the same level. So I want the header, and I also want the head. Let's just grab these things because it's going to be very similar to what we're doing here. So this is the head, and we want to go .. / because of our routing. We're inside of another folder. We're going to go up one. Okay, and then finally, let's grab the bottom parts. All this. These are the bottom components, right? And we're going to put those in there too, right? So all the same stuff. We're just using another template. That's all I'm doing. All right. Just imagine if there was another template, another need for another template, maybe a slightly different bottom or a slightly different header or something else that you can have, a different navigation altogether you can have, right? That you can include. So that's the index.ejs here. And now what I want to start thinking about is how I'm going to contain everything, right? So the first thing is I'm going to change the type from EJS, right? I'm going to change the type from EJS out to HTML so I can start doing some quick changes, right, with Emmet. So it's going to be like this, okay? So this is the stuff I'm going to type. Div dot container, right? We've done this before. Inside of div container, I want a div with a class of row. Inside of that, I want a div with a class of column dash medium dash offset 3, and then column dash medium dash 6. Okay, I'm just going to wait for it to update on your end. You may not see what I'm seeing. Okay, and then I'm going to press tab, the tab key. And there we are. So that's this part. So that's the container and the row, and we're going to put that in here. So actually some content is what's going to go in here. And inside the content area, I'm going to have a couple things. I'm going to have an H1, right, with a title that's going to be coming in inbound. So this is where my title is going to come in, just like normal, the title of my page. And then I'm going to have a my list that's going to show me the contact list. Okay, so it's going to be a table. That's what I want, right? So here's underneath here, we want to have a table. I'm just going to hide this part right here. Inside the table, we're going to have it's going to be a class we're going to use. This is a bootstrap class. Table dash bordered, right? Dot table dash striped dot table dash hover. And what this is going to do is going to style our table in a certain way, right? And then inside of our table, right? Inside of our table, we're going to have a TR, so a table row. That's what's going to happen, right? And inside of our table row, we're going to have, and what did I mess up here? Table with a class of table, table bordered, table striped, table hover. What did we do wrong? Yeah. And then inside that we want a TR. Doesn't like that. Okay, so let's just start with this. Sorry, don't want to take too much of time retyping stuff. Emmet's supposed to work nicely. Well, in here, what we really want to have is some kind of header row, right? That's what I really want. That's what I'm trying to build. So a TR, inside the TR, I want table header, right, times 5. right? So if I do table header times 5, right, and each one of these things has a class of text center, right? Right, so table header times 5 with a class of text center, right? And if I press tab, it's going to give me this 5 table headers. Let me undo that so you can see that again. So this command will give me 5 table headers. Okay. And inside here, I want to put the stuff that I want, right? Which is, for now, our first name, last name, right? And the next one would be, of course, the contact number, right? And human English kind of stuff. That's what I want in there. And then these last 2 rows, we're going to leave empty because I'm going to have eventually some kind of edit and delete function in there. I don't have it right now, but I will. Okay, so that's the first part of the table. Are you with me? Because I don't want to lose you guys. This is where we're doing some typing, and I want to make sure that you guys are good. Everyone good? Hopefully. Hopefully you guys are good. How about this? Anyone not good? That's a better question for you guys. All right. So you guys are all good. Let's continue. So now what we want is, once we've done this header row, right? What's happening? Sorry. Just got a... Is that an unhappy face? Been better. Does that mean bad? I don't know what that means. Anyways, hopefully that means good. Everyone's okay. But let's get back to this for a second. I'm just trying to make sure that you guys don't fall behind. That's all. All right, so now what we need, and this is the last part we want to type in, is a repeatable section. A repeatable section that's going to be created over and over again by EJS for us. So we need a repeatable template row. That's what we need, okay? And this is a very standard way of doing things, okay? So one thing is we're going to make a for loop here, okay? So we're going to say that we're using EJS to make a for loop. We can do this, where we say let count is equal to 0, where count is less than the contact list, right, dot length. We know contact list is an inbound object because we did that. I'll show you that. I want to count plus plus. I'm open my curly braces. I'm not going to close it here just like before. Remember, we're going to just use the % greater than sign to close it off. And what we want to do is we want to create the ending part. So that's the opening, and then this is the ending, right? We want to do that first. So that's kind of our for loop. Anything inside there is going to be repeated, right, by EJS. Let's turn back EJS so you can see it. So right now we don't need more HTML too much. So I'm going to just turn back our EJS kind of code hinting so we can get that. All right. And then what we want is another TR, so another table row, right? So here's our table row. That's going to be repeated. So new table rows, a new table row for each, basically for each contact in the contact list. That's what we want, all right? And inside here, we want to design some table data, right? So where we have a class that's equal to text center. Sorry, I'm typing this one time, but then you're going to see we're going to reuse this in a second. And then we want to inject inside of this area between the TDs here, the table data, we want to inject contact list, and we want to use the index for that, count, the first member of the contact list, right? And then we want first name, okay? And then we're going to close it off like this. So we're saying, okay, so every time we loop through, we're going to make a new piece of data, a new column that we're going to add in. That's what TD is, right? Inside the row, we're going to have a column that's going to fit underneath first name, underneath this table header. That's going to include, it's going to be centered as well, and it's going to have my first name in there. That's from the contact lists 0. This is the first member or the 0th element of the contact list. Okay, and then we're going to do it again. So I'm going to copy this one a couple times, and we're going to say this one will be last name, and this one will be contact number, which is what we've been doing this entire time. Okay, so that's those two. We also need a couple of empty ones right now because I don't have the contents that I want to put in here. So we're just going to put a couple of empty columns. So TD and TD because they're going to be empty right now. But we're going to fill them up another time. All right, so that is more or less where we're going to display our data. Okay, are you with me? Okay, so really, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, could I put this in its own content? Absolutely. Could I inject this in my index.ejs file? For sure, I could do that. The one that I already have, right? But I'm using this one because I want to make sure that we're all good to go. Okay, now that we've done this and we can save it, so we've saved this part, I can go back to my contact controllers, right, this one, and I can comment out the console log, and I can comment in this part, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. So now you can see that I have two objects I'm passing in, title and contact lists. Now, unfortunately, they're called the same thing, contact list and contact list. This contact list is a document array. This document array is being passed into the contact list property as an object. That's what's happening here. So that's why it's the same name. Don't be confused by this. They're two different things. This is the property that's being passed into the page. This is the document array that's coming from the database. That's what's happening. Okay. But you'll see this pattern over and over again, like online. If you actually were to search up kind of help on how to do this, you'll see that it's contact list, and you'll be like, wait, what does this mean? Well, that's what it means. It's just a way of doing things. So I'm saving this now. I've saved everything, and if we go back to the page, right, you can see now immediately I have my contact list. Okay, that's what you guys should see now. Okay. Notice I have all of this. I don't have a link for contact list, but I do have this. Okay, and that's what it's been generated. I have, this data, right? And notice I have a couple of columns that are free because they're not doing anything right now. Okay. And if I go into here, control backtick, right? And I go back into that data, into Mongo, and let's add another piece of data. So we've added Tony Stark. Let's add in someone else, right? I like Bruce Banner, as an example. He's one of my favorite dudes in the Marvel Universe, so let's use him, right? A little meek for his powers, but, he turns into a beast. All right, and then here's his contact number here in Toronto. 416-555-5559. Yes, very inventive. Okay, so I inserted that guy, and if I go back to this page, notice it hasn't updated because there's nothing to pull, but if I refresh, immediately I get Bruce Banner in there as well, right? So that's how it works. It's pretty simple. And that, my friends, is our read operation. Okay? Questions around this so far? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We basically pull from the database, we separate out, we deserialize. So first of all, everything in the database is serialized or encoded. And now what we're doing is we're deserializing everything and pulling things back from the database into our node application. And that's what we're doing. All right?
How are you getting stuff from the database?
What do you mean?
Did you do that yesterday?
No. Aren't you getting it?
I forget. I don't know.
What do you mean, how am I doing it? How am I getting it?
I don't know.
Point me out. Is this not working for you? Let me push this up. Oh, you're not. Okay. Let me push this up to GitHub, and then this way it'll help. You're not following along. Okay, no problem. So I So we'll add all this to the thing. I'm going to go over it for you. No problem. One sec. So added contact list page to site. That's what we kind of did. And the contact list connects to the database and all that stuff. Here's push. All right, so now it's pushed up on DC Connect. And on, it's on DC Connect because there's a link on DC Connect, but it's also up on GitHub. All right, so let's take a look at this, and I can answer your question. Okay, so yeah, let me just close all these little documents up because we don't need them all. So you can see that it looks more complex now than it was before, but I'll go through it with you again. From the server on. So server starts off, it accesses the app that's inside of my config. Here's my app. My app, what it does is we use a regular way to get all the, my application going. We're using Express to basically route. That's what we did yesterday. Today, what we did is something totally different, right? Today's what we did was we reconfigured our app and put everything inside of our server folder, right? In our db.js, we have this URI. This is the connection string right here, MongoDB localhost mydb.
Okay, that's
right? So that's it right here. So this is connection string. And then inside of my app .js, which is here, what we're doing is we're loading up the database package, Mongoose. Mongoose is a library that helps us connect to MongoDB. And here what we're doing is we're using this connection string to connect to it. We're using some event listeners, right, to connect to make sure that we're connecting properly to the database. That's what's happening here. All right. So once we connect to the database, okay, great, we've connected, but who cares? We need some kind of a way of getting data, and to do that, we've created a model for this, which is this contact model. It sits inside the models folder. All right, so here's the models folder, and we did this with the Mongoose package itself. Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I got you in here, Sterling. Okay. So you're good from now. I can stop, or you want me to keep going? Okay. Yeah. So after we got the Mongoose thing, the schema, from there we did everything we connected. And then once we connected, we needed some kind of route and controller, which is what we did. So here's our contact route, and our contact route has one controller, which is the display contact list. Inside display contact lists, which is here, right? All it does is it spits out the contact list that we get from using the model, contact model. We use the find method that we use normally we find normally in MongoDB. And find finds whatever we want. We're finding the entire contact list. We're not just finding a specific object, everything. And then this entire contact list, which is a document array, we're passing it into the page that's being rendered. And this page, we've made a special page for our contacts. Now, we don't have to do this. I just wanted to show you how you can do it. But you could have used the exact same template, which is already sitting inside views. So if you look at views, we could have just used index.ejs and made another content, which would have been contact list. But however, a lot of times what we want to do is we want to separate our sections or our different parts of our website with their own template, okay, index.ejs, and its own set of content. This content is really the index content, so you could rearrange the views folder so it's more organized than what I have in here. Okay. Great, we've done read. We might have time for a delete if I want to delete something. Deleting is easier than updating or editing. Updating and editing needs another page, right? A whole different page on how to do that. And let's see if we can delete. All right. So how do we delete? Well, we need another route and we also need another controller for this. Okay, so both a route and a controller. So let's think about this. If I was going to plan the route, so I'm going to go back, I'm going to leave this alone, the views folder now. I'm going to go back into my my route and my controllers. I'm going to open those two things up. in my contact, I need to be able to get the delete. So I need some kind of way of, if I put the user is going to put in a URL, like press the delete button or something, as an example. Okay, that's what the user is going to do. So when the user presses the delete button, we need to know which object to delete. That's what we need to know. Okay. So I want to perform my delete. That's what I'm going to do. And so it's going to have its own get route. This is the one that you might be confused with later on, because you're going to say, why not a post? Well, there's nothing to post. It's just we're going to make a request. So get request to perform the delete action. That's what you want. Okay. And we're going to say router.get, and when we're going to say /delete, so it's going to be the delete. So contact list /delete / right, and then the ID of the object, whatever the ID is. And this is how you would code it. :ID says take the ID of the thing that I'm looking at, right, and that's going to be used for me to decode a deletion. All right. So now we need the other part, which is the contact controller perform delete. I don't have that yet, but I'm going to code it anyway. Contact controller. I'm just going to put it in. It's going to be called perform delete. Okay, I'm not going to encode hinting because it doesn't exist, right? And then I want to go into the contact controller and code that up really quickly. Okay, so, and that's the last thing we'll be able to do, I think, today. I don't think we'll have time for editing, only because it needs a page. Deletion doesn't need a page. Okay, it just needs an extra button is what it needs, right? So again, so perform delete looks like this. Okay, so module.exports.perform delete, right? That's going to equal to just the same thing as before, request, response, and next, where we're going to create an anonymous object, right? And inside here, we're going to say let the ID be equal to the request, whatever the request is, params, the parameters from the request, right, .id. Okay, that's what we want. And you're going to say, wait a minute, what is that? What is the request parameters, right? Well, we haven't gone there yet, but I'm going to send something from the page. When I click on a link, I'm going to click on a button, and I'm going to send a request from the page. It's going to include the ID. All right, that's what's going to happen. And then I'm going to say that I'm going to use my contact model .remove. Remember, remove is the command, and I'm going to look at an ID that matches the ID that I got. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to see if there's an error, right? And if there's not an error, if there's an error, first of all, we're going to put it out to the console, right? So we're going to say console.log. We're going to log the error as an example, and we're also going to do res end. I'm going to stop production, because if we do something like this is really bad. So res end stops the response completely, dead in its tracks. It'll cause a big error server, and this is what we want. Else, because this is when a database operation fails, we want to refresh the contact list, right? Contact list, because the delete has happened. If the delete works, the delete just happened, and we're going to res redirect, and I'll talk about what that is in a second, to /contact list. All right, so that's interesting. That's new. So what is res redirect? There's res render, which actually creates the page, and res redirect basically moves my page, a redirect directive, to another page. So it's just going to refresh the contact list. That's what this is going to do. Okay? So when I delete, it's actually going to just update this page. It's going to render this page up here. Okay, so that's what perform delete's going to do. There is no page that it needs. However, we need a button to make this happen, right? Some kind of way of deleting a specific thing. And for that, we're going to update our view. So I'm going to go into my views, into my contacts, index.ejs, and now we're going to add that button that we were missing before. So remember these two little spots, right? One is for an edit button, and one is for a delete button. And we're not going to do edit today. We'll wait to do that next week because edit is a bit more involved. We'll try and handle edit with authentication, which is what I want to handle next week. But today we'll do the deletion. And the deletion is going to be give us hints on how to do the editing, all right, if you think about it. Okay, so without further ado, let's make sure I have all the proper referencing so I don't mess up because we don't have any time. Without further ado, what we want is a button, okay? And it's going to be TD, this button, it would be on the outside, TD with the class that's equal to text center. In fact, all of them have that, right? So we might as well put that in here. Class is equal to text center. Okay, so both those two things. Inside this one though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a button, and it's going to be an anchor tag, right? An anchor tag with a link href that equals to /contact list /delete, right? Here's that delete the link, right? And inside here is going to be what I'm going to delete. % equals to contact list, and then it's going to be count, the one I'm looking at, right? ._ID. That's where it's coming from, my friends, right? So this, right, is the link that we're going to process. Okay? So that's the actual link. So when you click on it, it's going to say, hey, go to the delete link and then get rid of or pass in a reference to the contact list that I'm looking at. This contact list right here, the count, which is the area that I'm looking at. Okay? And I want to look at the ID, that special ID, that hex, special hash that I'm looking at. Okay, that's what I want. I'm going to inject it right in here inside of my object. Okay, so the link is going to be modified every time. Is what this is doing. Okay. Okay, so that's one. And then I want to also attach in here. I'm just going to go to the next line. I'm going to keep this little thing open here, right? And I'm also going to put in something from Font Awesome. So I'm going to separate this for a second. I want to put in a class that's equal to, I'm going to code it as a button dash danger, right? So it's a red button, right? And I'm going to close it off. So this is where it gets closed off. That's the class. And inside here I'm going to have an I tag. So an I tag. Remember, the I tag is going to be with a class of FAS-FA-trash, which is the Font Awesome. And we'll make it trash.alt because I think it looks nicer, right? And then after this, we're going to have a space and delete. So it'll actually say delete. And we'll just take this little anchor tag here and we'll move it back across. Okay, so that's what it should look like. So let's go through it again. So text center, this is going to be inside of our column, right? An href, which is a link. Contact list, which is the new area that we've just created. Delete, which is a new route inside of contact list, right? Think about contact list as a group, a routing area, or a subgroup, a link group, right? And inside this subgroup, right, you have the delete link. Inside the delete link, I'm passing in an ID, right? Here's my ID that I want to delete. Okay, and this whole thing is going to be the request object, this thing here. right? The request object is going to parse the URL. The URL is going to be /contactlist/delete/ the ID of the object. Okay, and then the button, it's going to be coded as a button. The anchor tag is going to appear as a button, and inside the anchor tag we're going to have this trash symbol that's going to come from Font Awesome and the delete text. Okay, that's all we should need, and everything should work. Let's take a look. So again, I'm going to make sure I save this. Here's our controller, and you can see that if I hover over, you can see that I get something now. Before I wasn't. And if I go back out to my page and if I refresh, I should see a bunch of delete buttons. Okay, so these delete buttons will not stop me from deleting anything. If I click on this delete button, it's going to be gone right away, right? So let's delete Bruce Banner, the last guy. So boom, delete. Okay, and he's gone. Why did it automatically delete? Because of what we told it to do. We said that in our controller, as soon as we've done the deletion, refresh the page. That's what's happening. This is why it automatically got removed. And as you saw, there was no check and balance. I don't care if it's getting deleted. It didn't ask me, are you sure? It just did it. Okay? So what we want is some kind of JavaScript or jQuery that we'll put in to stop us from automatically deleting all this stuff. And by the way, if you're not sure that this happened on the database, let's take a look at the database itself. So if I press on Control backtick, and if I look at the database now, so if I say, here's my Mongo database, I can say db.contacts.find.pretty, right? You can see that I only have 3 objects, right? So I have Tom, right? I have Peter Parker and Tony Stark, and if I want to add Bruce Banner back in, I just have to tab up and enter him. There, he's entered. Now that doesn't spike anything from happening here, but if I refresh, he's back. Okay, so there you go. And I can delete someone else. I can delete Tony Stark. Now, mind you, if I do this, the ID will be different afterwards. Notice what the ID is right now. If I go back up and say find pretty, you can see that the ID for Tony Stark ends with a 5F. Right? However, if I go and delete Tony Stark here, right, he's gone. And if I go back up and let's find pretty, you can see Tony Stark is no longer there. Right? So there's Tom, there's Peter Parker and Bruce Banner, and Tony Stark is finito, right? But if I add him back in, so I want to put him back in. So let's say Bruce Banner, here's Tony Stark, and put him in. He's in, and if I go back and refresh, he's not going to be in the same spot. He's going to be at the bottom. Why? It's not in alphabetical order. It appears as it does in the database. It's not, we're not putting in a row, or we're not putting in a record. We're putting in a new document. This is something totally different. Okay? And inside of our database, if I want to do DB contacts find pretty, you can see that Tony Stark does not end with the same ending anymore. He's actually following Bruce Banner now with another ID. Okay? So that's really what I wanted to cover. For the most part, delete. And we did 2 parts. We did read and delete. Next day, we're going to do an update, right? We did actually, we haven't done a creation, an add, and we haven't done an update, an edit. Okay, so we need those 2 things. We need a button to add a new one and some kind of edit. And both of those things are going to require a brand new template because I need a page to show some kind of way, an input to add in a new contact. Okay, and we're going to handle that next day. I would have liked to do it this, and if I had another hour with you, I could totally do it, but I don't have another hour. So it is what it is. Also, what I'm hoping to do is get this up on MLab, but we're going to have to reserve that for next time. Okay, so totally fine with that. So any questions? I'm just going to go back to Zoom and see if there's any questions from you guys about how this is done. I'm going to push this up on GitHub in a second. Anybody? You guys are good? Awesome. All right, so yeah, right? That's how it's all working. It's pretty straightforward in terms of the way it works. Now, be mindful of this. See how I have a Mongo client? If I close this down, doesn't mean my Mongo client's gone, right? So notice that my Mongo client's still there, right? Exception int and listen, non-existent path, data directory d : data db not found. You should put it in c : backslash or / data db. That's where it should be for Mongo, right? So I'm not sure what happened there, but you should be in the right place. Are you talking about like in your actual folder? Let's hang back for a second, Spence, if you got a second, and then let me finish with this, and I'll handle with we'll talk about your problem in a sec. Okay. All right. So if no one else has any issues, this is kind of an intro into Mongoose, and if you follow the PowerPoint, it kind of takes you down in there. It talks about how to do most of the schema and model, how to separate it out, so you can do your own. And if you keep going down in there, the document itself kind of shows you how this all works, making a new user, finding multiple documents, and so on. I'm going to be detailing how to do editing and deleting after this, all right, or editing and creating after this. All right, so that's the document. So I'm going to stop recording now on YouTube, and I'll see you guys all next week from a YouTube perspective. But hang back for a second for the people that are here. I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of what's due this week. Okay. So I'm going to stop recording on YouTube.